clear up my window here. Hello, everybody.
Hello, John.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to this.
Hi, John.
Hi. So welcome to the, whatever this is, the June 4th meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers. Today's meeting is going to be about corvids, a word you have to pronounce more carefully these days. People think you're talking about COVID-19, but no, corvids with an R. We're talking about crows, jays, and magpies. So that'll be fun. I am John Callender, our co-hosts in the meeting. Will be Tom Beland and Laurel Luby, and Jenny Slaughter is also co-hosting, but I believe she's going to be over managing the YouTube live stream. So if you're interested in watching us via the YouTube live stream, you can see the link to that on our blog at carpwithoutcars.org. But you know, if you're willing to be part of the Zoom meeting, it's more fun and more interactive. So I'm glad you folks are here. I'll just mention, like we always do, you know, if you can keep yourself muted when you're not actually talking, that's helpful. It keeps me from getting distracted when I think someone is trying to talk. If you do want to talk, though, definitely unmute and you know, let us know what you want to share. Very happy to have people sharing as part of the meeting. Has anyone seen any good birds this week? Brody, I see you have your hand up. Tell us what you've seen, Brody.
I've seen a northern mockingbird, a hooded oriole, and a Bullock's oriole. Oh,
you had a Bullock's as well.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention, you know, Tom and I were talking before we let folks in from the waiting room. We have seen some eBird lists from who we assume is you showing up in eBird. So that's great. Thank you for contributing.
Yeah, because I got the app and that actually really helped. And yeah,
it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What other fun birds have we had lately? So again, if you're like me and you're just checking eBird every day to see what's happening, you already know about this. But we had a report of a reddish egret at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, which is a rarity for Santa Barbara County. Back when we were still meeting at the library, we had our herons and egrets talk not that long ago. And we talked about the reddish egrets, and one showed up. So it was very exciting. Also frustrating because the salt marsh, this was in the restricted access part of the salt marsh, the western part of the Carpinteria Salt Marsh that's part of the UC reserve system with a locked gate. And you have to have permission to go in there. And historically, a number of us have had permission you know, to go in as part of this ongoing bird survey. We have to sign up, and it's kind of, there's a whole process. But that's been shut down with the social distancing requirements. They've shut down all the research there. And it's just now getting to where it's going to be opened up again, and there's going to be some new procedures. And you know, the person who reported this bird, I think, was in there sort of unofficially, and I'm not going to say anything about that. I was really happy that we got the report about the bird. But then I wanted to go in and see it, and it turned out like, oh, at low tide, you know, this is something you've always been able to do. You can walk along the beach. You can go down to Ash Avenue in Carpinteria and walk west along the beach to the mouth of the salt marsh where it empties. It comes in, and the water comes in and out. As long as the tide is low enough, you can get there and you can look up into the marsh. And that part of the marsh right there by the entrance is where the bird was. So I was able to go up there and see the bird and get confused and report it as a little blue heron on eBird, which was, you know, I think a good lesson for me. We're all prone to errors from time to time, and this bird I thought was kind of ambiguous looking. But I got straightened out by the helpful eBird reviewers, and we corrected that to a reddish egret, which is what it was. And I was happy either way because they were both new birds from my year list. I was just a little embarrassed, but still happy. And the happiness more than outweighed the embarrassment, so that was cool. Brody, I saw you were waving your hand again.
Thank you. I was wondering, did you or the reddish get a picture?
Yes, in fact, remind me once I start the actual presentation, which I'm going to do in just a minute. Remind me about that, and I will pull up that checklist, and you can see my my bad photos of a reddish egret, my poor and distant photos that I was, confused enough to think showed a little blue heron.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. We all make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other fun reports people want to share? I actually have a fun thing that Jenny Slaughter, our co-host, forwarded to me, and it's I'll show that again once I start sharing, because you had this, and it's sort of relevant to the topic. It's Corvid content. So once we get to our crows, jays, and magpies, I'll share Jenny's fun. There's a video and a photo that I wanted to share. So remind me about that if I forget, which I'm prone to do. I get excited. Anything else? Oh, so there's one more thing I did want to mention before we really jump in. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but if you are like me, kind of, involved in the online birding community, you're paying a lot of attention to bird Twitter, which is a thing. There's been some, sort of interesting stuff going along with a lot of other, very serious and very interesting stuff going on in the country lately. But one thing that happened was there was this incident in Central Park a little over a week ago, I think now, where Christian Cooper, who's a bird watcher, was out in Central Park, and you probably all saw this, it was in the news. So, but a woman was walking her dog, and she had her dog off leash in this part of the park where you're not supposed to have your dog off leash. And he, asked her to put her dog on the leash, and they got into a bit of a verbal exchange, and she was refusing to do it. And it escalated to where she essentially threatened Christian Cooper, who is African-American, that she was going to call the police and report that this black man was making her feel unsafe in the park. And she proceeded to do that, to call in this police report as he was filming her. And so then the film, the recording that he had made, the video went viral, and everyone saw it. And it was just a kind of, sad reminder that then fed into the subsequent events in the news over the next few days, about just what a different experience something as, simple as bird watching can be for, people who are Black in this country. So there's been a really interesting and informative, for me, initiative in the last week where some Black bird watchers online have this, it's the Black Birder Week, I think they're calling it, where they're putting out social media and they're sharing their experiences. And I put some links to some of the really cool stuff they've done in the description for the live stream YouTube video and in the blog post about this meeting. So I don't want to talk about it a lot, but I certainly encourage people to check it out. I think it's really interesting. And the one thing that I mentioned to Tom in talking about this before the meeting started was, I took it for granted for a long time that, everybody who loves birds the way I love birds can go out and have this same experience that I have and that I want to share with all of you, and that I think, we all understand because we're big fans of this activity. But it's important to realize that there are people out there for whom there's this whole extra layer of risk that they're experiencing just to be out there bird watching. And so I think it's worth listening to them and listening to their experiences and just considering what, I can do or what we can do to make the activity more inclusive and more available to everyone, because the birds don't care, the birds should be available to everyone because it's such a great thing to be able to do. All right, so with all that said, any other feedback or stuff? Yeah, Brody.
I was just gonna say, and right before this, I had put in the hairy woodpecker that I had saw. And
oh, great!
This, yeah,
that's great. So you because that was tricky. I know you had a list earlier in the week where I think you reported a downy, but you weren't sure. Is that right? Or
yes, correct.
So you feel like you've got a
yeah, it might have been a downy or an acorn. This one was a hairy.
Yeah.
This one was a hairy. This one. It could have been a small acorn, but it was just a small woodpecker. So and there was the sun, so I couldn't really tell.
Yeah, lighting is key. Getting a good look at the bird. You don't always get a good look. All right, well, that's great. Yeah,
I got it today. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. Okay, Mary Jo, you're waving.
I saw a black hooded grosbeak, and I hadn't seen one for a while, and I was happy about that. And I have the sweetest little family of titmice in my yard that come to feed, and the baby, the fledgling, is so funny because it flutters around and it's kind of awkward, and you watch it learn, and it actually has a baby face. I love it. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, this is a fascinating time. You know, the spring migration is kind of winding down. So a lot of the spring migrants, like the big numbers of black-headed grosbeaks we had coming through for a while, they've mostly moved through. But now we've got the whole nestling thing happening. And yeah, there's baby birds starting to show up, and they're.
I want to.
What's that, Suzanne?
May I was just at Lake Los Carneros, and I like taking pictures, and I got so lucky. There was one American coot that's hiding in the grasses with a little tiny one, and then I kept walking. I took a picture, and then I saw two tiny chicks just sitting on the concrete wall of the lake. And I was really worried about them, but eventually there was a mom and two more, and then all four of them, and they got fed. And they were really tiny, very cute. Yeah. So,
and they're like little cute fluff balls, right? With sort of the reddish heads.
Reddish beak and eyes, very odd looking, cute thing. Yeah. Yeah.
When I first saw what a baby coot looked like, I was surprised because they really look. They're very colorful. It's like, wow, why would you have your babies be so brightly colored when your adults are just this sort of black bird? I don't know.
No, that was fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Anybody else want to share something before we keep on going? Okay. Well, I'm committed to trying to really. I'm really going to try. I always say I'm really going to try. I'm going to try and get it done in 45 minutes today, so we can get out and have time to go bird watching or do whatever else we want to do for the rest of our day. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And we will talk about corvids. Actually, before share the screen, share the content I wanted to show you, the reddish egret, and then we'll talk about corvids. Okay. Let's see. Should I share the whole desktop? Yeah, I could do that. Let's try that. So I'm going to try sharing my whole desktop, and if what you see is kind of too small on your screen, or if that's a problem, let me know and I'll switch to just sharing the window. Not sure what works best from your folks' end. We'll give that a try. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, you should be seeing my presentation now in the middle of the window. And I also want to make it so I can see your faces. Let me do that too. Okay, so what was I going to show you first? So I wanted to show you, so let me show you the reddish egret, right? So that's going to require me to drag another window over here. So with any luck, you can actually see my eBird checklist. Give me a thumbs up, somebody, if you can see my eBird checklist on the screen. All right, excellent. So yeah, here's my list from down at the mouth of the salt marsh, and here are my reddish egret photos. Make them a little bigger. So there it is, inside the marsh. And with the benefit of hindsight and some helpful input from Dave Compton, it's not as compact as a little blue heron would be. It's got this brownish on the head. I was thrown by the fact that it had a dark beak. The adult reddish egret has this sort of two-toned beak with like light and dark, and this didn't have that, but that's because it's a young bird. Here's a slightly better photo of it, but there you go, reddish egret hanging out in the Carpinteria salt marsh. Okay, and I was going to show you Jenny's stuff. I'm going to show it to you when we get to scrub jays, because it's scrub jay content. So remind me about that when you get to scrub jays if I don't show it to you. Okay, all right, on we go. Let's do the actual presentation. Okay, so we're going to talk about corvids, crows, jays, and magpies. And just in terms of some generic fun corvid facts, corvids are fun. I think they're a really neat group, and I think they're a fun group to learn about. In fact, this was the very first topic we did at the very first Carpinteria Birdwatchers meeting ever, like 3 years ago, I think, was corvids. So I'm a big fan. And some of the things I think are fun about them is they're kind of sizable. They're good-sized birds. They're not like little tiny, jobs hiding in the bushes. So you can get a good look at them. They have bold habits and loud voices. They're not sneaking around and hiding from you. They're out there, like you're going to see them. They have distinctive features, and so they're, you know, pretty identifiable. They're not too hard, with at least one exception. There is a tricky species pair we'll get to at the end of the talk, but for the most part, they're pretty easy to identify, and they're easy to see. You know, like I say, they're out there, so that's why they're fun. I mean, among other things. And they're really smart. So corvids are generally thought of as among the most intelligent of bird species. This is whoops, we go back. This is these are New Caledonian crows, which are sort of famous for their intelligence. New Caledonia is this island in the, I guess it's the Pacific Ocean, so it's kind of between New Zealand and Australia, sort of to the north a little bit, or between New Zealand and New Guinea. But they have these New Caledonian crows that live there, and they're famous as birds that create and use tools. So what you're seeing here is some researcher, they put some food, some peanut butter or Vegemite or who knows what, in these holes in the branch, and the birds have constructed these little probes they can use to reach down in there and extract the food. And in experiments, you know, in captivity, they've demonstrated that they're able to figure out like novel approaches, things they haven't done before or passed on for generations, and they can, like, I don't know, construct little hooks and pull things out of things they can't reach into. Just cool, intelligent bird stuff. So another example of corvid intelligence. So here's a California scrub jay, which is a species we're going to talk about because they're in Santa Barbara County. And if you have peanuts out for them, you have seen probably this view of them, because they love to come and clear out your peanuts. I put out a bunch of peanuts this morning, and by 10 a.m. all the peanuts were gone. And you're like, how can that jay eat so many peanuts? Well, it's not. It's caching them. They cache their food resources. They take their food and they squirrel it away, cache away, jay it away for later. So researchers have studied this caching behavior, which they've evolved for acorns is the food source that they use this caching for. And but they're perfectly happy to do it with peanuts at a feeder. And so they will take the nut and they will fly off with it, and they'll bury it. Typically they'll excavate a little hole and stick it down in there, and then they'll cover it up. They'll put something over it to conceal it. And researchers have studied this behavior a lot. And a few years back, there was this really interesting study that talked specifically about the nature of the intelligence that they apply to do this. And it's very interesting. They store thousands of these food caches and apparently can keep track of them pretty well. Like, which when you think about it, that's impressive. I'm not sure I could store thousands of peanuts all around my yard and be able to go back and get them. I mean, a couple dozen eggs at Easter, I'm like, there's always that one egg I can't find. But the scrub jays are apparently really good at this. And then the really intriguing thing that came out of this research is they demonstrated that if a scrub jay is observed, like, they don't just cache, they also pilfer is the other specialized term for what they do, which is they take acorns from other scrub jays' caches. So they will watch another scrub jay hide an acorn or a peanut, and then when it leaves, they'll go over there and they'll get it, they'll steal it, they'll pilfer it. Apparently when scrub jays are caching, if they are aware that they are being observed by a potential pilferer, they will exhibit different behavior. They'll come back and they'll wait for the pilferer to leave, and then they will re-hide the cached food in a different location, which I just thought was very cool. And these researchers said, oh, so this is evidence that they have what in psychological circles, and I don't know anything about psychology, but is called theory of mind. They're taking this behavior that they're saying that this indicates that the jay is aware that there are other actors out there, there are other organisms out there that have their own perspective, that have their own thinking processes, that they're engaged in this behavior that represents that their model of the world encompasses the fact that there are other organisms out there that are thinking too, that are competing with them in this sort of clever way, and they're deceiving each other and they're interacting with each other in this way. And this is in in a very interesting way. Like this is a developmental milestone that humans don't exhibit until we get to a certain age. Like they talk about, developmental stages for young humans. You have to get to be like around 4 years old or so before you start exhibiting this theory of mind behavior, this recognition that other organisms have their own needs and wants and motivations separate from your own. So this was really interesting. It made a big splash when this research came out, that it's demonstrating that these birds have this level of intelligence. And there's been some pushback. There's been other studies since then that have made the argument that, there's a lot of assumptions going on in attributing that behavior to this theory of mind that, it could just be that the jay is anxious, like the jay recognizes it's being watched by a potential pilferer, and that just makes it exhibit this anxiety where it rehides the food, or it, is concerned about not finding the food. So because it's had this experience before where the pilferers means that it comes back to its cache and the cache is empty. So it's just agitated and wants to hide a bunch more. So maybe it's not as much a thought out strategy as the theory of mind folks would have you believe, and it's more just this behavioral thing. Mary Jo, yes, you had a comment.
I think many of us have experienced jays and stealing food or raiding the bird feeder or something. I feed my cat some dry kibble by the front door, but inside the screen. And once in a while, because, the birds steal it. So once in a while, I'll let the cat out and the screen door kind of swings open. I have a jay that comes in and steals the food in my house. But and I mean, even when I'm standing there looking at it, they're just classic. They really are. They know I leave that out. Then I now give them some on the banister anyway. But we've all had that experience, or many of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating question, and again, I love watching birds just to watch them, and certainly the behaviors of intelligent birds like jays raises all kinds of questions about what are they thinking? In what sense is what they're thinking analogous to what I think as a human? And it's hard to really know exactly what's going on, but I just like watching them and seeing what they're doing. And yeah, Brody, I see you've got a hand up.
Yeah. So I was gonna say that the scrub jays always steals my dog's food outside. Do that, and you are right about their voices are loud. The California scrub jay is one of the ones that I have memorized their voice, and if I hear it, I know that it's a California scrub jay.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's great to hear. Okay, well, I obviously could talk about this for a long time, but I'm going to keep on going. Sort of a similar story that I won't go into as much detail about, but common ravens are also known for their caching behavior and their pilfering behavior, and they exhibit kind of interesting interactions where, again, you can interpret this as a sign of a pretty intelligent bird. So the particular example of this that I was reading about today, the ravens cache food. They defend their caches. So if another raven comes in and is going to try and pilfer from their cache, the first raven will get aggressive, and they'll get into aggressive interactions. So the potential pilferer, they will try and mislead the other raven. They will act very casual. They will act like they're not interested in the cache, and they'll wander over and they'll do something somewhere else until the caching raven has left, and then they'll make a beeline for the cache. So they talk about this as a neat example of, again, they're engaging in active deception, which, is unfortunate in a way. We'd like for people at least to be honest, but the active deception is a sign that there's some kind of interesting cognition going on there that raises questions about, just what is their model of the world that they've got in their head, and how does it reflect, how they interact with the world. I'm going to keep on going. So let's talk about the corvids that we have in Santa Barbara County. So here is our standard eBird histogram. This shows you the 8 species that have been reported in eBird of corvids in Santa Barbara County. And I'm going to go in rough order of how frequently they're reported, which is, again, the thicker boxes. The thicker green boxes show you that that species is showing up in a high percentage of eBird lists from Santa Barbara County. And one thing you can see is all these histograms are pretty uniform thickness all the way across. These birds are not really migratory. In some cases, they're not migratory really anywhere in their range. In some other cases, they're just not migratory around here. But for the most part, these are birds that exist in one place. They move around a little maybe, but they're not making seasonal shifts in where they're interacting with things. And that has some sort of interesting consequences that we'll talk about as we move through these species. But you know, they've got a good thing. They don't need to fly around. You know, they don't need to travel, you know, hundreds or thousands of miles to get to different resources. They've got all the acorns they need right here. They're perfectly happy. They're just going to stay here. They're going to cache those acorns. They've got access to them year round. That's what they're going to do. Let's see. So I'm going to go through let's see, I'm going to save the crows and ravens, the crow and raven I'll save for the end because they're sort of a little bit trickier to identify, and I want to focus in on that when we get there. But I'm going to go through all the other birds in order pretty much of which are most common first. So you can see by the thickness of the line, our most common corvid, Santa Barbara County, is the California scrub jay, and the American crow. They're close to tied. They've got about the same thickness of line. They show up on a lot of lists. Then we get what? We've got, I guess the common raven would be next, a little bit thinner, so it shows up in fewer lists. Then we get down to this trio of birds that are even a little bit harder to find, the yellow-billed magpie, the island scrub jay, and the Steller's jay. And then finally, we've got a couple of them that are just super hard to find in Santa Barbara County. And in fact, I have seen neither of these birds in Santa Barbara County, and I've tried pretty hard. So, you know, they're hard to find in Santa Barbara County. I've seen both the pinion jay and the Clark's nutcracker up in the eastern Sierra Nevada. So I feel like I've got a good idea of what they look like and sound like. If they were out there in my vicinity, I'd have a good chance of identifying them. Because again, you know, they're pretty easily identified if they're around, but they're just very rarely around in Santa Barbara County, at least in the parts of the county that I get to. All right, so let's talk about this species. Oh, and I get to do vocalizations. So let's hear what they sound like. That is not the one you want to hear. Here is my list for the corvids. Okay, so let me get all right, this will take a second. I need to get the presentation back on screen. Okay, you should now be seeing our bird. Thumbs up if you see the bird. Yes? Okay, good. And then I'll see if I can get the sound going. Okay, so this is a recording by Thomas Megarian. And as I usually do, all these recordings come from xenocanto.org. So you can go online there and you can find these recordings. So can you guys hear that? Yeah, Brody's giving me thumbs up. Okay. And that should sound very familiar to you, Brody, based on your own report. Here's another recording of the same bird, or a different individual. But a different kind of vocalization that they like to make. Okay,
That's
so what
the
kind
one
of?
I hear more. The second one was the one I hear more.
Yeah. So this is, of course, the California scrub jay. Okay. And it's just a good-looking bird. What can you say about a bird that looks like that? So back when I started bird watching, it was just scrub jay. There was just one bird in the field guide, one species. And then in 1995, there was a split and we got 3 species, which was very exciting for 1995 me, because I don't remember if I'd seen, I think I had seen the island scrub jay. So I think I'd seen all 3 of them. So I went, you know, my life list bumped up by 2 at that point. So that was kind of exciting. And then in 2016, there was another split. So what had been the western scrub jay around here was split off into the California scrub jay and the Woodhouse's scrub jay, where the Woodhouse's scrub jay is more inland. So Eastern California, Arizona, you know, the Southwest, but the coastal birds were the California scrub jay. Here's the range map. I took this range map from allaboutbirds.org, which is the Cornell site affiliated with eBird. I hope they're okay with it. They don't, you know, I'm not sure what exactly their copyright views are, but hopefully it's okay with them. But go use their site. Go sign up for a subscription on Birds of the World and support their efforts, because they're worthy efforts. So here's the range of the California scrub jay. And you can see, again, not really migratory. It's year round in this whole range. It's scarce in some areas here. There's fewer of them, but again, they're not really moving around. They just stay in one place. So here's the eBird sightings map. And this is from a few years ago when I first did this topic for Carpinteria Birdwatchers, but it's going to look very similar if I did it again today. So, you know, the blue pins are any location where there's ever been an eBird report of California scrub jay. The red pins are sightings within the last 30 days. This is Rincon Point here and Carpinteria generally right here. So I'm really zoomed in just to kind of give you an idea. And they're, you know, pretty much throughout the area. They like suburbia. They're perfectly happy with human environments. They do quite well here, especially when people put out cat food or peanuts. All right, so here's another species. And let's hear what it sounds like. Spoiler alert, it's very similar sounding. And here's another recording of the same species. So this is kind of fun. So I should have set this up. So this second recording is what's called whisper song. And you'll hear this from both the California scrub jay and from this species if you're close enough to them when they're doing it. It's very quiet. And it's just like this little, you know, muttering that they do. Let me play some more of it. So I did mention that first recording of this species was by Guy Kerwin, and then this one was by Andrew Spencer. And this is the island scrub jay. So this is the bird. It is North America's only island endemic. It's the only species we have in North America that just lives on that one island. And it lives on Santa Cruz Island, is where you can see them. So the people at Island Packers, I'm sure, were very happy when that split happened, because suddenly every, you know, avid life lister in North America needed to go to Santa Cruz Island to see this species. And it's not hard to see if you can get out to Santa Cruz Island. Like they're around the landing. They're, you know, probably looking for handouts or peanuts or whatever they can get, and they're loud and they're there. But you have to get there to see them. And I just think it's really interesting to me. Like, so here's their eBird sightings map, which is also their range map. That's the only place they are. That they're isolated enough that this little stretch of, you know, whatever it is, like 15 miles maybe, you know, from here to the mainland, that's enough to isolate them across evolutionary timescales so they can become a separate species that's genetically, you know, they're not interbreeding with the mainland California scrub jays. You know, they've got relatively short wings. They're optimized for relatively short flights. You know, they flit around in the brush and the oak and the chaparral. They're just not long range flyers. They don't need to be. And it means that little 15-mile stretch of water, that's a barrier that they're just not crossing. So I just think that's kind of cool. Like other, you know, migratory species, they're not going to speciate out at Santa Cruz Island. They're going to, you know, the populations are going to go from Santa Cruz to the mainland and back again, and they're just all interbreeding with each other. But not with the scrub jays. Their gene pools are isolated. I just think that's kind of cool. Okay, another species.
That bird,
yeah.
I just wanted to say, I noticed that bird was banded, had a band on it.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of ongoing research out at Santa Cruz. You know, because it's this isolated population. You know, there's a lot of banding.
Do they
activity.
stay there, or do they come on this part of Santa Barbara?
No, they're just out there. That's the thing. They stay on that island.
That's it.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and Brody, I see you've got your hand up.
Steller's Jay.
Oh yeah, sorry. And I'm going to back up because I forgot to share Jenny's cool content. So Jenny shared this video, and again, I'm going to try and make this work. Let me see. So this I want to put over here. So can you guys see this movie screen I've got? Okay, great. So Jenny shared this. You got, and then just to set up the scene a little bit, what we have here is cat on the sort of cat apartment structure, this very fun structure for your cat. Is that right, Jenny?
Yep.
So this is the fluffy cat tail right here. And this, I guess, is like an open patio or a porch or something. So there's access here of some sort. So,
Right.
So here we go. Maybe it wasn't worth all that setup, but it was I thought it was very fun. So the scrub jay is coming in and complaining about the cat, like getting right up to it and screaming at it. And then you also shared with me, why the scrub jay is so upset with the cat. And that's, let's see. That's this photo that you shared with me. So this was a fledgling scrub jay that the cat got access to at some point. Is that right?
Yeah, so this was last year's fledgling that the cat brought in, and the adults built a nest in the same location in our yard, but they basically harassed the cats to the point where the cats can't go outside during the day anymore. I'm sure this is why.
Yes, this could actually solve the whole, outdoor cat problem that birders get so up in arms about. We just have to assign every cat with a pair of scrub jays to just harass them until they're afraid to go outside. Yeah, no, a nesting scrub jay is fearless. I mean, like a lot of nesting birds, it just throws itself into the fray. So this, you said, you mentioned to me, you were able to restore this bird, and it seemed to be okay, and they put it back in the nest, and
Yeah, it was fine.
yeah, cool. All right, well, I just thought that was fun. I wanted to share that. Okay, so now we can move on to the bird already helpfully identified by Brody, and let me get the recording so you can hear what it sounds like, because all these corvids, voice is a great clue. Like, they all have distinct voices, and if you learn those voices, again, they're not shy. They're out there vocalizing loudly and often. This is a recording by Thomas Megarian of this species. Triple finch in the background. And, as a kid, I used to go up, my family had a cabin up in the San Bernardino Mountains in Southern California. And to me, that sound just takes me back to being up in those mountains, because there's a lot of these up there. Here's another recording of a different vocalization it makes. And that was by Thomas Graves. And this is, as Brody pointed out, a Steller's jay. So here's its range map. So it likes conifers, it likes being up at higher elevation with pines and trees like that. Doesn't really look from the range map like we're gonna have it here in Santa Barbara County, but not to worry, we do in fact have it. And we have it right around here in Carpinteria. It's one of the better places in Santa Barbara County to see them. So they like being up in the hills a little bit. And again, if you can find some conifers, some pines or cedars or trees like that, that's where they really like to be. You can't really tell on this map very well, but this is basically along Gobernador Canyon Road. If you get out along there, there's some spots that they like to show up. They like being right where Gobernador Canyon Road reaches the 150. There's a spot right there where they like to hang out. Let's see, this is, I think that's along Santa Monica Creek. This is up at Toro Canyon Park. It's another good place. And then Ramiro Canyon, which isn't visible on this because I'm zoomed in too tight, but just up here in Montecito a little bit, there's the Ramiro Canyon Trail. If you go up that trail, you got a good chance of getting a Steller's jay or two. And, again, I'm not really talking about these birds' appearances so much because it looks like that. It's pretty obvious. When you see it, and again, you've probably heard it by then, so hopefully you've got a clue that it's something different. And if you see it, it's got that big black crest and that beautiful blue plumage. It's hard to miss. All right, so here's another species. And it sounds like this. This is Ross Gallardi made this recording. And then here's another recording. This is by Ron Overholtz. This is the yellow-billed magpie. And there is a black-billed magpie that looks quite similar, except that it has a black bill instead of a yellow bill. But we really don't have them around here. The black-billed magpies are like from the Sierra Crest east. You see them? So in this part of the state, yellow-billed magpie is what you're going to have if you see a magpie of any sort. I think there's one report of a black-billed magpie from many decades ago in Santa Barbara County, and it's sort of the people who evaluate are like, we're not even sure how it got there. It could have been like an escaped, caged bird or something. But if you see a magpie, it's probably going to be a yellow-billed magpie around here. Here is its range map. You see we're really just down here at the southern end of its range in Santa Barbara. And here's the eBird sightings map. And you can see, Santa Ynez Valley is where you want to go to see them. I'm not sure about this. I mean, this is a really unusual sighting down here along the coast west of Santa Barbara. Usually if you want to see them, you take the Casitas Pass up and over to like Lake Casitas or up to the Santa Ynez Valley areas north and west of there. And if you just drive around that farmland, the kind of, horsey vineyard country up there, keep your ears open or just watch the fence lines along the roadsides. And again, if they're there, you're going to see them, and they're loud and kind of amazing looking. The term my wife always uses for the way they fly is that they're rowing. They're like pulling that really long tail behind them as they kind of flap along. I just think they're really fun. Okay, so now we're getting to the rarities. These are going to be birds that are going to be much harder for you to come by in Santa Barbara County. And if you do, that's great. Put it in eBird so I know, so I can go chase after it. This is what this one sounds like. This is a recording by Lance Benner. And then here's another recording of it by Micah Reigner. There's some pygmy nuthatches and then probably a mountain chickadee in there too. All right, this is the Clark's Nutcracker.
That sounds like fake.
It sounds like what?
It's call. It sounds like fake.
It sounds fake?
Yeah, it sounds like fake.
Yeah, they really sound like that. Again, I'm fairly familiar with them from visits up to Mammoth Lakes in the Eastern Sierra. But yeah, they sound like that. This was a bird that, was named after, is it Nathaniel Clark? The Lewis and Clark expedition. It was Meriwether Lewis and I think Nathaniel Clark. And, they were out there doing their first big scientific survey up the Missouri River. And they started coming across these birds. And it was named after Nathaniel Clark because he was probably because he was the first person to shoot one or something. But this is their range. And you see, we just got a little tiny bit, not really in Santa Barbara County, but right on the edge, and occasionally one will stray in here. And again, they're higher elevation birds. They're up there in the forest. Here's the eBird sightings map. So again, this is over in Ventura County. This is the 33 coming up out of Ojai. And if you're an obsessed Santa Barbara County birder, you know where the county boundary is. It basically runs north and south right through here. And you get up here, and this is Santa Barbara County over here. So this is probably your best bet if you want to try and see one in Santa Barbara County, is to get up in the Cuyama range up there, or whatever that range is called. I even forget right now, but up in towards the Cuyama Valley, up in the highest peaks up there. But more regularly seen over here on the Ventura County side, up in the highest mountains there. All right, and one more jay species. This one sounds like this. This is Paul Marvin made this recording. Here's another recording. This is by Andrew Spencer. And they are noisy like that. They travel around in these big flocks. This is a Pinyon jay. And as you might expect from the name, they like pinyon pines, like to hang out in the pinyon pine forest, sort of this, arid country kind of pine that lives out there in the sagebrush and the pinyon pines. And, their range really doesn't get them anywhere close to Santa Barbara County normally, but occasionally they have these eruption years. There will be a bad pinyon pine crop, and roving flocks of these birds, like 20 or 50 of these loud pinyon pines, will come traveling down into areas that can actually get them into Santa Barbara County. It's only happened a few times, but potentially it can happen. They're again more frequently found in Ventura County. Here is the eBird sightings map. This is like Big Pine Mountain, I think, which is the highest point in Santa Barbara County. These sightings, near Santa Barbara, kind of interesting. None of these sightings are any earlier, or all these sightings are like before 1990. These are like 30 years old. And then this one was just a couple years ago, which is kind of wild that this group of them got all the way out to, this is San Miguelito Road out south of Lompoc. Dave Compton, the same one who helpfully corrected my identification of the reddish egret the other day. He was out there at San Miguelito Road in 2018, and they were pretty distant, but he's super expert, and he heard them, and he's like, yeah, there was a flock of I think 16 or 18 of them he saw going across the road, and it was exciting. It was like, wow, somehow they got all the way out there without any other people seeing or reporting them. And I was one of a number of people fanning out across the landscape, over the ensuing days, trying to get another sighting, but no one ever reported it that I heard of. So anyway, pinyon jays, someday maybe, one will come swooping by, or a whole group of them will come swooping by more likely, and you'll hear that vocalization and you'll know they're around. All right, so enough of the frustrating rarities. Let's get back to some more common birds. I think most people, even non-birders, are familiar with that vocalization, right? That was a recording by Thomas Megarian. Here's another one by Thomas Megarian. And this, of course, is the American crow. Here's its range map. And now we actually have a little bit of a migratory pattern. They're not really traveling through distinct summer-winter ranges, but they do expand in the summer up into Canada and then retreat in the winter. But around where we are, they're pretty much just here all year round. eBird sightings map, kind of similar to the scrub jay sightings map. They're throughout the residential parts of Carpinteria. They're perfectly happy raiding our dumpsters, or they view humans in the landscape as probably as a win overall, just in terms of the food resources. They're opportunists, and they're looking for whatever they can find. They're nest predators too, like a lot of corvids, scrub jays are too. They will, this time of year, they will be out there looking for other birds' nests and using their intelligence to figure out where those eggs and nestlings are and taking advantage of that food resource. So the smaller birds chase them. They chase the bigger birds away from their own nests. There's a lot of chasing going on by the birds right this time of year. Here is a baby crow, which is a frequent thing to encounter this time of year. And just to mention, so I talked about in our books meeting how much I liked the What It's Like to Be a Bird book by David Sibley, the new book from him. And I was just, going through it, and he's talking about corvids, and there's this cool part about baby crows that he talks about here. And he makes the point that, and this is probably well known to most bird watchers, or certainly most of you, but if you encounter a baby bird that's in this sort of state, it's a fledgling, it's clearly not really capable, it's sort of flopping around, it's not flying very well, it's down on the ground. You think, oh my gosh, it's a lost baby bird, I need to save it. Really, the best thing you can do for it is probably to leave it alone. Its parents are probably around keeping track of it. there is this, very high risk window in their development where they have left the nest, but they're not really capable yet. And the parents are stressing out, following them everywhere and chasing off cats and hawks and other predators. Certainly it's a really good time to try and make extra efforts to keep your cats indoors because, it's hard for a cat to resist a flopping, inept baby bird. But if you can leave them with the parents or leave them in the wild, it's a good idea. And one thing that Sibley talked about in that book that I didn't realize is that, yes, people bring them in and try to rescue them and raise them, and they're like engaging pets. I mean, if you're gonna, take care of it, they're really fun and personable. But it's really not a good thing for the bird. And specifically with corvids and crows, they're, again, highly intelligent, and they go through a long period of interacting with their family members and learning, like how to be a crow, how to successfully survive. And if you pluck them out of that and restrict them from that, and then try to release them into the wild once they're, fully fledged and able to fly well, they tend not to survive. The survival rates for human rescued crows are actually very low because they just don't know enough. And so they really need that time with their family members. And it really is, in a sense, a family. This is another thing that I found out from reading Sibley's account and what it's like to be a bird, about crows in particular. Crows tend to be in family groups when you encounter them. And at roosts, there'll be maybe, dozens or hundreds of them. But just when you see them out, doing their thing, there's a group of like 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 crows. And what you're frequently seeing there is a pair of adults with this year's babies, and then the previous years, like the yearlings, will tend to hang around with them. And he talks about how if you study them carefully, the adults tend to be very shiny black, but the first year birds tend to be more of a matte black, so not real shiny, more of just a flat kind of black, and more brownish, like their plumage will have faded and you'll get this kind of brown, a little bit of a brownish sheen to it. And those will often be like the 1-year-olds that are still hanging around with the family. And then the first year birds, the birds that are, just recent fledglings, they're often their plumage is noticeable too. A lot of times they look kind of scruffy and grayish, or they're a lot of times they'll have some gray feathers mixed in with the black feathers. So having learned that, I started paying more attention to crows since reading that, and you can totally see it. Like you can find a group of 4 or 5 crows and you can actually pick out which ones are the adults and which ones are the, they look adult size, but they're younger. And it's just kind of cool. It's a fun thing to see. Okay, but on we go. And our last species, let's hear what it sounds like. This is a recording by Joost van Bruggen, whose name I'm probably butchering. I apologize to Joost. And then here's a recording by Jarek Matuziak. This is our common raven, which in other parts of the world is referred to as a northern raven. It's actually it's a circumpolar species. Like it lives in the northern hemisphere. Here, we'll show you. Here's its North American range map, but its world range map extends through Europe and Asia as well. It's basically, all the northern hemisphere north of the deserty areas, you're going to have ravens. And again, non-migratory, and they stay, up at the Arctic, above the Arctic Circle through the winter, which is kind of amazing. They're up there scavenging. Some of these Christmas bird counts come in from places like Nome, Alaska, and some years, and they've got like, an hour of daylight, on their Christmas bird count. And some years they just have one species. They'll have the ravens. It's the species that they have because they're up there. They're finding ways to like, scavenge from wolf kills or bear kills, or, a way to survive through those really harsh winters. Here's their occurrence in Santa Barbara County, or at least the southern part of Santa Barbara County where we are. And it's pretty interesting. There's a little cluster of them down here in Carpinteria. and you get up here along the coast, like, past Goleta out into El Capitan, and they're back on the coast again. But in between here, through Santa Barbara, you really don't see them along the coast. And there was a whole discussion in the SBCO birding email list recently, where there was some back and forth about, people misreporting ravens, because it's, they look quite similar to crows, and it's quite easy to mistake one for the other. So there was this whole discussion about, well, where are the ravens actually? Like, they're really not on the coastal plain in Santa Barbara proper, Santa Barbara City and the surroundings. But you come down here and you get into like Summerland and like Toro Ridge, and you get them again. And then they're up here in the hills as well. And I'm not sure, but my interpretation is that they really just don't like the city. Like they're, unlike crows who are perfectly happy, raiding dumpsters and stuff, ravens are a little too wild for that, or a little too smart for that. They just don't want to get into that. They're more of the birds of open country, and we do have them nesting down here in Carpinteria. They nested along the cliffs down by the seal haul out, and then they nested under the pier by the seal haul out over at the Carpinteria Bluffs. So there's a pair of ravens that's been there pretty reliably for at least the last 10 years. So you will see them down here, and again up to along the coast up to Summerland a little bit, but more inland is where you see them. If you get up into the hills, that's where you're going to tend to see them going by. But they're definitely seeable, and they're very cool birds. So let's do a little quick refresher of how to distinguish them from crows, so you can make your identification and with some degree of confidence. So here's 5 tips. Yeah, Brody, you have your hand up.
2 that I see are the wings. They go farther back than the crows, and the beak's a little bit more like big, like but width wise.
Yep. Yeah, it's thicker. The beak is thicker and heavier. Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that. So I'm gonna do my best to give you, my sense of these are the things to look at. And like with any tricky bird identification, and I should have remembered this when I was dealing with my reddish egret versus little blue heron identification the other day. It's good to gather lots of information before you come to your conclusion. Don't jump to a conclusion and then start trying to convince you that that's the right thing. That's like what Watson does in the Holmes and Watson story, in the Sherlock Holmes stories. He jumps to some explanation, and then he starts, cherry picking data that supports that. And Holmes will say, no, Watson. You must wait to form your theory until after you've gathered the relevant facts. So try and do that with your tricky bird IDs, and it will serve you well. So tip number 1, it's probably a crow. Around Carpinteria, that should be your starting assumption, because that's most of what we have here around Carpinteria. Again, other parts of Santa Barbara County, you get up inland and it reverses. If you're up in the Cuyama Valley, crows are quite rare on the valley floor up there, but ravens are all over the place. But down here in Carpinteria, mostly it's going to be a crow. There are a lot more crows than ravens in Carp. In a recent Christmas count, we counted 275 crows and just 7 ravens, and that's pretty intensive birding across the 15-mile circle. So probably a crow. So another tip: if there's a bunch of them together, they're probably crows. So and before I go on though, I want to point out. So in this photo, you can actually see how this one is kind of brownish looking. And this one too is kind of brownish looking, not so shiny. So that's what Sibley is talking about with these family groups. These are your yearling crows probably, that are part of this family group. And then the shinier one here is probably one of the parents. And I'm not sure about these others. This one looks kind of brownish too. But if there's a bunch of them together around Carpinteria, they're probably crows. So around Carpinteria, we tend to get ravens in 1s and 2s, and not always. But usually if there's a bigger group of them, they're probably crows. But one possible exception would be sometimes a whole bunch of crows will mob a raven. So you'll get a whole bunch of crow/ravens flying around, and there'll be a raven in there, right? There'll be a bunch of crows trying to chase a raven away. So look for that. If you see a bunch of them and they seem to be aggressive towards one of them, look at that one they're being aggressive towards, and maybe it looks a little different because it could be a raven. And occasionally during migration, a big group of ravens will come through. We'll get like a big flock circling over the city as they move up. I've seen probably 12 or 15 of them at a time, a few times, like up on the Franklin Trail, which was exciting, but unusual for around here. Okay, so tip 3, and here I've played fast and loose with someone's copyright again. This is from the Sibley Field Guide. I scanned this image, and hopefully Sibley will not be unhappy because I promote his book, right? Like he needs my promotional help. But so this is an example of raven soaring behavior. You know, when ravens are often going to be soaring, they're going to be, you know, flying on fixed wings, circling in thermals and updrafts rather than always flapping. Crows can glide sometimes, but for the most part, if they're soaring much at all, it's a sign it's a raven. And sometimes ravens will soar together in pairs, like they'll do these aerial acrobatics together, which is very much a raven thing, not so much a crow thing. So if you see them doing that, it's a good tip. Okay, but now we come to the nitty gritty, and that's structure. Right? I mean, they're both black all over, so plumage patterns aren't really going to help you much. The color pattern isn't going to help you. But if you focus in on the structure, there are some really good clues. And Brody, you were already pointing this out. So the raven has a bigger, heavier beak. You know, and that can be subtle, and there's individual variations. So again, it's one of the clues you want to put into the mix, but don't just fixate just on that. They're just longer. The raven is, its tail is longer. It's more of just a longer bird. The crow is a little stubbier in terms of its tail length. Same thing with the wings. The raven's wings are a little longer and narrower. The crow's wings are a little broader and not so long. The wing tips themselves, the ravens have this thing, and this picture is kind of showing it pretty poorly, but so if you number the primary feathers, these outer flight feathers, you start at like P1 over here and they go up to P10 at the end. So the P9 to P10 length differential is pretty dramatic in a raven, and this wing actually shows it better in this photo. You can see how the last outermost primary, the P10 primary, is relatively short, and then the second to last primary, the P9 primary, is significantly longer. And what this means is when you see the bird flying, its wingtips have like 4 pretty evenly length, pretty long, even length feathers, and then this one that's shorter. Right? That gives it sort of a tapered kind of look to the end of its wing. Whereas with the crow, like this, I think is the crow's P10 and the P9 here. They're closer to the same length. They end up with more like 5 feathers, just kind of making this more rounded wingtip. And it's subtle. I mean, it's something to look for. And again, once you really key in on it, it can be pretty helpful at times. But and then the final tip, again, if they're vocalizing, is the voice. And you know, we did this already. The crow is like, you know, caw, 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 and the raven's more like, you know, rock, rock, rock. And if you listen to the recordings in your field guide app, or just compare them. Yeah, Mary Jo, were you raising your hand? You're just excited. You're gesturing in excitement. Okay, cool. All right, so I think that is, oh, Jenny, you're waving your hand. Yes, Jenny, what's up?
Had to unmute. I just read something pretty interesting about ravens. I do a lot of work in the Mojave Desert, and ravens are responsible for, a big part of the decline in the desert tortoise population. Yep. If you go to the Mojave, it's really easy to see ravens. They're everywhere, and they nest in transmission line towers all over the desert. But just what I was reading, about 100 years ago, there was a census going on of wildlife in the Mojave, and it took 2 years to see one raven. So wow. The population in the last 100 years has just, I'd love to see a map of if there was this data. It's significantly changed.
Yeah, they've really, the population has just exploded, right? So it's, and I'm not sure, but it's like, a lot of it is just with the traffic and the road kills, like they're getting food from, things that are, I mean, they can support a big population of them because of the scavenging they're doing for road killed rabbits and things. But then because that big population is there, it's a real pressure on the survival of the desert tortoises, because now the young tortoises come out and the raven's like, oh, well, I prefer a road killed rabbit, but I'll certainly be happy to take this young tortoise. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like similar to the conservation issue with the island foxes on Santa Cruz, where, you know, there were all the pigs there, and the pigs were a direct pressure on the foxes as well. But it was also that the piglets were supporting the golden eagles, and then the golden eagles, when they couldn't get piglets, were perfectly happy to take foxes, and that was all very complicated. But that is, yeah, you do see a lot of ravens out there. Like, you know, again, when I go up to the Cuyama Valley, because there's certain species that I really need for my county list that are only up there in the deserty areas of Santa Barbara County, there's just tons of ravens. There's just lots and lots of them. Okay, well, I do have this one last thing. So this is a video that I shot at the Carpinteria Bluffs, and we were talking about the pairs of ravens that have been nesting there and these aerial display flights that they do. So I have a video I made out at the Bluffs of a pair of ravens doing an aerial display flight that I wanted to share. Oh, actually, I can get audio. And again, this kind of soaring flight that they're doing, those are not going to be doing that. I mean, they might do it for a few seconds, but they're not going to just go back and forth like this and do it. Skip ahead because it's part of the end I want to get. I should do that. So they're flying back and forth like this all this time, and then at the very end, I thought it was cute. They one just came back and was being very sneaky, like it's down there right by the surf. So being very, like, doesn't want to be seen as it's going to its nest, presumably. I thought that was fun. Okay, that is it for the Corvids presentation. So I can see you all again. You're all still here, or at least enough of you that it looks like a big group, which is nice. So any feedback or questions or commentary? I see there's been a little bit mentioned in the chat. Let's see. Butterfly said that was wonderful. Thank you, Butterfly. It's very kind of you.
I was going to say, you're really good at getting the birds, because every bird that I've reported so far, you've already got.
Well, I've been trying very hard. And this is, so I've been obsessing over my county year list for, I think this is the 3rd year now. And, you know, it's like any kind of bird watching, or probably any kind of activity, you know, you get better at it, you kind of learn. And I've, like, the first time I go to a new location that I see an eBird, like, oh, this bird has been seen in this location and I don't have this bird yet, I really want to go there. The first time I go there, I am just wandering around like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll spend hours and hours, I'll be in the wrong place, I'll totally miss the bird. And eventually, if I'm patient enough, you know, and I go 2 or 3 times, maybe I'll get the bird and I'll finally realize, like, oh, I needed to be looking over here. And just, you know, so again, you do it, you know, the longer you do it, the more you learn. And, you know, for me, I think the biggest thing I learned from kind of falling off the deep end of getting really obsessed about it over the last few years is just, you know, I spent my whole life as a bird watcher and thought, oh, I thought it was pretty good. I knew what I was doing. And I am just, you know, the people who've been doing it obsessively for decades, they are so far up that ladder. There are so many rungs on the ladder, and I'm like one rung at a time, and I feel like I am down towards the bottom of the ladder. You know, I'm still putting in misidentifications in eBird and having to be corrected. But it's great and it's fun. And for me, you know, the learning part of it is what's the most fun about it. And I just think that's a great thing about bird watching, is that you can do that fun learning part right from the beginning. In fact, in some ways, the learning is even faster right at the beginning because everything is new. But that part, in my experience, really doesn't change. You know, I'm still, you know, I'm surprised by something. I learn something every time I go out, even if it's to a place I've been 100 times before. There'll be something new that happens with the birds.
Yeah, but I live up right by Toro Canyon by the creek. So I see a lot of different birds that have a bunch of different trees growing at. And I've had a northern mockingbird too, but it's pretty cool. And now that I can submit the list, it's actually pretty fun because now people can see what, and yeah.
Yeah, and you know, now that you're submitting the list, eBird is very helpful. Well, it's helpful, and it's also a bit of a trap because it gamifies it. You know, it makes it fun, and now you can go there and you say, "Oh, show me all the ones that I don't have yet," and it'll show you a ranked listings of the ones you don't have yet, sorted by how easy they are to find. You know, and now you've got an incentive, and now you've got a way to keep score, and it's hard not to. I mean, for me at least, it's hard not to want to get just one more. And here I am 3 years later, you know, still trying to get just one more.
Yeah, but birds are just, before it's just, I didn't really think they were like really like much at all, but I got just like a book, and once I got it, I just really got into it, and now here I am, and I love it now.
Yeah, well, I think you're talking to a group of people, Brody, who understand exactly what you're talking about, because I think we've all had a version of that ourselves, and that's why we're showing up for meetings like this. And you know, hopefully, you know, we'll be able to go back to the in-person meetings. We can get together at the library like we were doing. But until then, for me, you know, this is a really fun way to kind of just share how cool and fun it is to go see these birds.
One last thing that I was going to ask is, how did you get into birds?
Probably not that differently from how you did. You know, I know your grandfather's here in the group, and you've talked about his influence on you. The first birding experience I remember was my grandmother was visiting from Florida, and you know, she came out to California, and she was sitting in the backyard, and she pointed out a mockingbird to me, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. You know, she knew what it was, and she described what it was going to do and what it was going to look like when it flew, and it flew, and it looked like she said. You know, I was like, wow, you really know this stuff. And it was just, you know, one step at a time after that. It's just you know, it's a fun experience. And I was talking earlier on, you know, about the whole issue with the Black Birders week, and the sense of, you know, it bothers me to think that there are people who have extra barriers preventing them from being able to enjoy that kind of thing, because, you know, the birds, again, don't care. You know, they're just they're living their lives out there, and they should be available to everybody to go see. And it's just a real privilege for me to go out there and be able to see what's there and see what they're doing. And
yeah, but I thought that was sad that since you told me, I thought that was sad that's how it happened. Like, it shouldn't be any different from some random person who is white asking you to do it. But
yeah,
people treat them like that, and it's not very nice.
That is true. And but you know, Christian Cooper, the person who had that experience, you know, he's an experienced birder. He's more experienced than I am, and he's out there doing it still. He's out there doing it today. You know, that didn't stop him. And he's in one of these, you know, the links I put to this online discussion they were having earlier today. He was one of the participants, and I just found it really interesting to hear his take on, you know, why birding is important to him and what's valuable about it. But I also like getting your take on it. You know, I kind of get both. I'm hearing the same thing from both ends of the age spectrum. So I think that's a good indication that you're onto something, that there's a real thing there that you're talking about. Okay, well, anybody else? I didn't quite come in at 45 minutes, but I did a little better than last time. You know, maybe I can get it down to 45 minutes next time. Anything else people want to share, or any requests for next week? You know, what should we talk about? Is there any group of birds someone really wants to hear about? Well, think about it. send me an email or
Oh,
tell me now.
Finches maybe.
Yeah, are there particular finches that you're finding interesting lately?
Maybe maybe house finches and other like other ones like that. Maybe.
Yeah, we can do that. We could do some sort of, you know, the common garden birds, you know, that we have that I probably overlook sometimes. You know, I get into the exotic birds, you know, the exciting different birds you have to travel to see. But then there's the birds that are just right out there in the backyard. And like a lot of people,
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of backyard birding lately. You know, if you
Yeah,
follow
that
me,
sounds
Honey
pretty
Bird.
good. Just like the garden birds. Yeah, because we've been seeing a bunch of birds just taking out a bunch of seeds and other stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, I'll give that some thought. Thanks, Brody. That's a good suggestion. And we'll see what I end up with and watch the website. You know, put an announcement up there once I settle on a topic. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you everybody again for joining in and sticking through the whole thing. Butterfly's suggesting a gull review in the chat, and you know, it's interesting. I look forward to doing gulls. Right now is kind of a weird time with gulls. Like if you've gone down to the Carpinteria Creek estuary down in State Beach, you know, to look at the gull flock down there. Like I was down there just a couple days ago. A lot of the gulls are really scruffy looking right now. You know, they're doing their molt and they're sort of just, they're not really crisp, you know, and it's interesting, you know, you can still see the beak structure and some of those clues that help you figure out the gulls, but it's not like in the, you know, later on in the year when they've got their crisp new plumage. It's just really nice. You know, you can really see them exactly. So yeah, so I'm a little hesitant to do gulls right now just because gulls are hard enough as it is. I feel like that's a really challenging group. And Suzanne Myers is mentioning sparrows in the chat, and certainly, you know, I could see adding sparrows in, rolling sparrows in with finches, you know, and they're kind of little brown jobs. I think we've done a version of little brown jobs before. I think I was just sparrows that time. Maybe I can be a little more all-inclusive. Anyway, I could take the next 20 minutes speculating about what to talk about, because that's obviously a lot of fun for me. But I'll leave it as a surprise. So look on the website, you'll see what we're going to talk about. And hopefully you all show up. And tell your friends, bring more people. We've got all kinds of room here in the Zoom meeting. So thanks everybody. And I will shut down the meeting and I'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
John.
So have fun.
Hi, Marion.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.